If you look at the map of Russia, one thing stands out immediately: its massive size. It is the largest country in the world, stretching across 11 time zones and 2 continents. From the icy Arctic in the north to the deserts near Kazakhstan, and from the Baltic Sea in the west to the Pacific Ocean in the east, it's a giant that dominates the world map. But here's the twist: nearly 80% of Russia's population live on just 20% of this vast land. The rest of the land is almost completely empty. But why is that? Why does such a powerful country have so much unused land? What makes one part of Russia so livable and the rest so difficult? To understand this, we need to dive deep into geography, history, and even Russia's politics, because the reason most Russians live in such a small part of their massive country isn't just about preference, it's about survival. Let's start with the basics. If you divide Russia into 2 parts, European Russia and Asian Russia, you'll discover a major imbalance. European Russia makes up just 23% of the land, but it's home to nearly 80% of the population. Meanwhile, the Asian side, also known as Siberia and the Russian Far East, covers more than 3/4 of the land but is mostly empty. The capital, Moscow, sits in European Russia. So does St. Petersburg, which is Russia's cultural heart. Most of the country's railroads, industries, and political institutions are concentrated in this western part. To understand why most Russians never settled in the east, we need to go back centuries. In the beginning, Russia wasn't the huge country we know today. It started as a few small Slavic settlements in what is now Western Russia and parts of Ukraine. These early communities were built near rivers, where the land was good for farming and the climate was easier to live in. But things were very different on the other side of the Ural Mountains. As the Russian Empire expanded, it tried to send people east into Siberia. The problem was that life there was extremely difficult. Siberia is known for its freezing temperatures, frozen ground called permafrost, and long distances between towns. Unlike Europe, where cities could grow around rivers and farmland, much of Siberia was too cold, too remote, and too tough to build on or grow food. But things began to shift during the Soviet era. When the Soviet Union came to power in the early 20th century, its leaders wanted to spread development and population across the entire country, including the empty eastern regions like Siberia and the Far East. But instead of waiting for people to move willingly, the government used force. Under Joseph Stalin's rule, starting in the late 1920s and continuing through the 1950s, millions of people were forced to move east. Some were political prisoners, accused of opposing the government. Others were simply regular citizens, moved for labor or security reasons. Many were sent to brutal prison camps called gulags, often located in the coldest and most remote areas. Life in these camps was extremely harsh. People were made to work in mines, forests, or construction projects under freezing conditions with very little food or shelter. At the same time, the Soviet government built new towns and industrial centers in the east. These were often near natural resources, like oil fields, coal mines, or military bases. The idea was to use Siberia's wealth to power the Soviet economy and strengthen its presence across the massive country. One of the most important projects during this time was the completion of the Trans-Siberian Railway, finished in 1916. This railway stretches all the way from Moscow in the west to Vladivostok, a port city on the Pacific Ocean. It's the longest railway in the world, more than 9,000 kilometers, and it was meant to connect the distant eastern regions with the rest of Russia. This was a huge achievement for the time and did help open up Siberia, but still, most Russians didn't want to settle there. Even with new cities and the railway, only small pockets of people chose to live in these areas, and the reason was simple: nature made it easier to live on the western side than the eastern side. The European side of Russia has always been more suitable for life. The climate is milder, the soil is better for farming, and the land is flatter and easier to build on. The soil in the European part of Russia, especially in regions like the Black Earth Belt, is one of the most fertile in the world. This belt stretches through areas like Kursk, Voronezh, and Belgorod, and is ideal for growing wheat, barley, and sunflowers. As a result, this region produces a significant share of Russia's grain. Nearly 70% of the country's total grain output comes from the Black Earth Belt region. Major rivers like the Volga, which is the longest river in Europe, and the Dnieper River have both historically served as trade routes. The Volga connects more than 11 major Russian cities, including Kazan, Nizhny Novgorod, and Volgograd, and flows into the Caspian Sea, supporting both agriculture and transport. This region is also geographically closer to Europe, giving it better access to trade, culture, modern infrastructure. Two of Russia's most important cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, are both located in the west. Together they are home to nearly 19 million people, and for good reason. These cities offer better roads, stronger healthcare systems, more job opportunities, and higher quality education. Many top businesses and government offices are based in Moscow, attracting professionals, artists, and students from across the country. Even during Soviet times, there was always a preference for the West. The Russian elite, including government officials and intellectuals, lived in Moscow or St. Petersburg. Most of the country's investments went to these cities first. That pattern continues even today. The average salary in Moscow is nearly twice as high as the national average. This focus on the West has created a clear divide. While the Western region became a powerful economic and political center, the eastern half, especially Siberia and the Russian Far East, was left behind. And this is because life in the east is extremely difficult. Siberia is known for its harsh climate. In places like Yakutsk, which is the coldest city on Earth, temperatures can drop below -60 degrees Celsius in winter. Rivers freeze for most of the year, and during the short summers, thick clouds of mosquitoes make life miserable. Towns are few and far between, separated by vast forests, mountains, and frozen land. Roads and infrastructure are difficult and expensive to build, and farming is nearly impossible in most areas. But despite its emptiness, Siberia is packed with natural wealth. This huge region holds most of Russia's oil and gas reserves, making it one of the most resource-rich areas in the world. According to official estimates, Siberia accounts for more than 80% of Russia's natural gas production and around 70% of its oil output. In fact, a large part of the natural gas that Europe depends on comes from gas fields deep in Siberia. Similarly, deep in the heart of Siberia lies one of the most remarkable natural wonders on Earth, the Lake Baikal. It's not just any lake. Baikal is the deepest lake in the world, plunging more than 1,600 meters below the surface of Earth. But even more impressive is that it holds about 20% of all the fresh water on the planet. Similarly, Siberia also holds over 40% of Russia's coal reserves and is home to some of the largest gold and diamond mines in the world. For example, the Sukhoi Log gold deposit in Irkutsk is one of the biggest untapped gold reserves on Earth, with an estimated 540 tons of gold. The region also contains large uranium deposits, making Russia the fifth largest uranium producer globally. But there's a big challenge. Getting these resources out of the ground costs a lot of money. In places like the Arctic or near the remote Yenisei River, the weather is freezing, the land is hard to reach, and there aren't many roads. That means oil drilling or mining here is much more expensive than doing the same thing in warmer and easier places like the Middle East or the United States. On top of that, moving equipment and materials over such long distances makes everything even harder and costlier. Because of these tough conditions, most people who live in Siberia are there only for jobs in oil, gas, or mining. Life in these towns isn't easy as they're far from big cities, surrounded by forests or ice, and the weather is freezing. When the resources run out, many people leave, and the towns are often abandoned. That's why there are many ghost towns in this region. Russian governments have tried to fix this. They've offered free land, lower taxes, and money to convince people to move east. But most people still refuse. The reason is simple. The weather is too harsh, the places are too remote, and it's hard to find things like schools, hospitals, or good internet. Life is just too difficult. Another reason for Russia's weird population pattern is its limited access to warm water oceans, and that has always been a major problem for its economy, trade, and military. Most of Russia's coastline is either frozen for much of the year or far from major global shipping routes. In the north, Russia borders the Arctic Ocean, but for most of the year, it's covered in thick ice, making trade and naval movement very difficult. While climate change has opened up some Arctic sea lanes in recent years, it's still unpredictable, dangerous, and extremely expensive to navigate. In the Far East, Russia does touch the Pacific Ocean, and cities like Vladivostok serve as important ports, but the problem is distance. Vladivostok is over 9,000 kilometers away from Moscow. It's on the other side of Siberia, and while it's technically a warm water port, winter temperatures can still freeze surrounding waters and make access difficult, especially without constant icebreaker support. This isolation has made Russia's Pacific ports important, but not central to everyday trade or population life. Russia's best ocean access is in the Black Sea through ports like Sevastopol, but here too there's a catch. To get to the Mediterranean Sea, Russian ships must pass through the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, both controlled by Turkey, who is a NATO member. In times of tension or war, these choke points could be blocked, effectively cutting Russia off from the Atlantic and global trade routes. So because the warm water port access lies mostly in the west or far south of the population, infrastructure and industry have naturally developed closer to these areas. But this emptiness is also one of Russia's greatest weapons. While eastern Russia may seem like a weakness because it has so few people, it actually gives Russia a powerful military advantage, and that is vast space. This massive, empty land acts like a natural buffer zone. If an enemy tried to invade from the east, they'd have to cross thousands of kilometers of forests, frozen rivers, and mountain ranges, some of the harshest terrain on Earth, before getting anywhere near Russia's major population centers. This gives Russia time to detect, delay, and respond to any threat. And this isn't just theory, it has already worked in history. During World War II, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union from the west in a campaign known as Operation Barbarossa. As German forces advanced, Soviet troops strategically strategically retreated deep into the interior, using the vastness of their territory to stretch enemy supply lines and buy time. As the Germans struggled with the harsh Russian winter and long distances, the Soviets regrouped, rearmed, and eventually pushed them back. The same principle applies in the east. Russia's geography slows down any invader, allowing it to absorb and outlast attacks. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union built some of its most important military bases, missile silos, and radar stations across the Siberian wilderness. These were placed far from enemy air bases and satellite tracking paths, reducing the risk of a surprise attack. The region also became home to strategic bombers and nuclear weapons, all hidden in remote areas where few people lived. So even though eastern Russia feels empty, it gives the country room to breathe, time to react, and places to hide its most powerful weapons. So why do 80% of Russians live on just 20% of the land? It's because nature made the West more livable and the East more challenging. But that empty space in the East isn't just a problem, it's also a hidden strength. It protects Russia, gives it room to defend, and holds the resources that fuel its power. Today, technology and transportation have improved. Flights from Moscow to Vladivostok take just 8 hours. Internet connections stretch across the country, but still the basics of daily life don't change. In European Russia, cities are close together, trains are quick, stores are stocked, and public services like schools and hospitals are better. Cities like Novosibirsk and Yekaterinburg, some of the biggest east of the Urals, still have modern life. But if you go deeper into the east, things start to decline. Many young people leave for the west to study or find work, and most never return. Remote areas have fewer births and more elderly people. So while Western Russia keeps growing, the east is slowly losing its people, even though the land there is still rich in resources. In the end, Russia remains a giant, but it's a giant standing on one leg. It has strength, but one wrong step, and everything could tip over, and that makes its future both powerful and uncertain. Subscribe this channel if you like map animated geography videos like these. See you soon in another video. Take care.